animal has access to the same ground for more than 3 days, as those plants start to recover, that will become, of course, you know, when they first come in there, they're going to take the most palatable plants that are in that paddock, and then in 3 days that's going to start to grow back, and as that happens they're going to go right back to those same plants. And if you can imagine a plant, everything that you see above the ground, there's a corresponding amount of root below the ground, and it's my understanding that when they bite off what's above the ground, the corresponding amount of roots below the surface will shed off, and that's what eventually becomes your organic matter. Okay, so if you can imagine, if you got a plant this tall, below the ground you got roots roughly that big. So if it takes half, you're going to shed off half of those roots. Now think about this in a continuous grazing situation. They eat it down to where it's close to the ground. Okay, so the root mass is very small, and every time they take a bite, they're getting a small bite rather than a larger bite. Okay, so you're not putting pounds on the animals, they're having to work harder to get more food. Does that make sense? Okay, so when they're shedding that smaller plant, there's just a small amount being shed, or when they're eating the plant on the surface, they're shedding a smaller amount of root mass below the surface. So you want a larger amount above, so that when they eat it, it sheds a larger amount below, if that makes sense. Okay, so then the other step to that is that you need to allow a rest period. And you know, there's a lot of debate about this. There's no definitive number, and of course, you know, different times of the year, different types of plants, there's all kinds of variables that play into that. Kind of the standard is about 30 days. So you kind of need to have enough paddocks to get around your property in 30 days so that you can always give your paddocks a rest for about 30 days. Now, this time of year, as we're coming into May, we are in May, I guess, this is the spring flush. So on cool season grasses, such as your fescue, your orchard grass, things like that, Timothy, this is the time of the year that they're just going gangbusters. Okay, so if you look at a chart of the year, you know, it's dormant during the winter, but this time of year it's going up. And when it gets hot in the summertime, like July and August, they're going to have that summer slump and they're not going to be very productive. But as it cools back down in the fall, they will take off again. September, October, the cool season grasses will do better. Now, meanwhile, in that slump, you have the warm season grasses, such as your big blue stem, your Indian grass, your little blue stem, Johnson grass, even though it's an invasive, Eastern gamma grass. Those are your warm season grasses. They thrive when it's hot, and they typically do better when it's dry too. So Johnson grass, it's interesting, that's actually an invasive species, but in the world of grazing, we love it. Cows love it. I've watched cows go across lush pastures of alfalfa or clover just to get to that Johnson grass. So whenever we have a patch of Johnson grass in our pasture, they'll go straight to it before anything else, and they will annihilate it, and it keeps coming back. The only real downside to any of the warm season grasses is if it gets frosted, it produces prussic acid poisoning. So there's a week or 10 days that you need to keep them off of there so that they don't get poisoned. I've not really found a big problem with that. Typically when that happens, they're not real prone to eat it. And this is probably a good time to share this with you. In the world of grazing, there's a lot of species of plants that are known to be toxic to livestock. And I personally have been kind of scared of a lot of them, such as like poison hemlock, Jimson weed, buckeye, things like that. But I've also found that if cattle have access to something good to eat, they tend to not bother it. Now, I have an exception to that, One is that several years ago, we had a group of probably 600-pound calves that we had in a paddock, and I didn't know there was a patch of poison hemlock in there, and it was lush and green, and the calves got into it. If that cat's bothering you, just push them down. But anyhow, calves got into it before I knew it was there, and they absolutely devoured it. I mean, they took every leaf off of it, and I was scared to death. I had 23 calves in there, and I thought they'd all die. Never bothered them. I guess it was diluted enough with the other things. There was cereal rye in there that was nice and lush, and they went to eat afterwards. But I was rather surprised by that.
Okay, question.
Yes.
With your warm season grasses,
yes.
Do you just have that mixed in your pasture to account for that summer slump, or do you have particular pastures of warm season grasses, or how do you manage?
Yes and no. Okay. So when I first started, of course, you know, I'm a wildlife specialist. And when I first bought this place, I had no intention of really setting it up for grazing. And back in this back corner back here, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Pastures to Prairie program, but I did my own prairie back there. And everybody talks about creating a prairie. What I did is I went out and collected seed at another prairie. Our DC at that time, Steve Wilson, had a 107-acre prairie that he actively managed at home. And he and I went through his prairie and collected a bunch of seed. And I grazed it down heavy with horses, and you know how horses will graze it down. And then I walked out there and threw the seed up in the air and walked away. And I got a nice prairie. So it was just mixed in with whatever else was back here. And that's kind of bad ground because there's a lot of sinkholes. There was some old apple trees and stuff like that. Well, we had a drought, and I ended up using that for grazing, only because that was the only thing we had left that year. And they completely annihilated it. I mean, they trampled it into the ground. I was about sick because I thought I ruined my 3 acres of wildlife habitat back there. Well, it came back gangbusters, and it was similar to like the bison herd when they come through. So if you've ever heard of the term mob grazing, basically that's what I did, and I didn't know I was doing it at the time. So that's back there, and it is mixed in with a lot of cool season. I haven't been actively managing it, and I graze it just like I do everything else. Over here, I did plant about 5 acres of warm season switchgrass and eastern gamma grass. And I can't say that I got a great stand, but it's over there. And I just put it into the rotation just like everything else. I don't have enough warm seasons to actively put them on it during the slump. So I kind of stockpiled during the spring flush and then go right on through. Now, Johnson grass exists in almost every pasture I got somewhere, but it's small patches here and there. And I really like it because, when the cool seasons are not growing, it's growing. So it exists in a lot of the pastures, but not in any great amount. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyhow, with that said, with the grazing, we have experimented with this more and more each year, and we needed to improve our infrastructure to support that. When we got this farm, I think we got roughly 150 acres we're grazing. We got some neighbors' property that we sometimes graze. Most of that doesn't have any fence, but I think everything that we own is pretty well fenced now, except maybe some of that over there on my brother Mark's place. And there's maps of it in that packet. So that packet was not really created necessarily for today. It was stuff from another event that we had, and it looks like that map's not real clear. I thought there was, I thought I had a collar one in there. Oh, okay. Well, I apologize for that. I don't truly know off the top of my head how many paddocks we have, but every paddock is completely different. They're irregular shaped. They're different sizes, and our herd has changed a lot over the years. we started out with 2 cows and a bull. We eventually got up to 120,000 pounds of beef here. That was the highest amount that we've had on the farm here. And then we were selling stockers there for a while. We got out of doing that, started selling grass-fed beef, and that has been going excellent. And to the extent that we actually made a major management decision of doing away with our brood cows and transitioning into buying stockers, and then raising them on up to sell as grass-fed beef. So I've developed a pretty good list of customers, mostly out of the city, that buy grass-fed beef. And what we were running into is a management challenge of having a brood herd and a meat herd. You kind of have to manage them different. And then you also have bulls over here, and you have to keep the bulls away from the heifers and the meat herd and that sort of thing. And as you're moving them each day, and we do try to move them each and every day, that would present some challenges. If you got the bulls too close to the heifers, then sometimes your fences got destroyed, the bulls got in, had unexpected pregnancies, that sort of thing. So, and then of course the other obvious thing is we were moving 2 herds a day every day. So that was double the work. And in our trio of me and my 2 brothers, we all have off the farm jobs that are 40 hours a week or more, and various commitments beyond that. And we all kind of have our own unique skill sets. So like mine is the management of the cattle and tearing up equipment. My older brother is good at fixing equipment. He's the mechanic in the group. And then my other brother, he kind of takes care of the infrastructure. So we all kind of have our own unique skill sets, but we can kind of overlap, and we all take turns with the moving of the cows. So like if I have a late night meeting, I just text one of them and they'll take care of it. But we do try to move them every day, and we do that year round until it gets pretty cold. So like about mid-January, when the soil temperatures are no longer able to assimilate the nutrients, we put them in that hoop barn over there. We built that hoop barn specifically for wintering the cattle. And I don't know if you can tell from here, but it doesn't come all the way to the ground, so there's good air flow through there. And then one of the challenges that we were having, the reason why we built that, is where you have your animals condensed down to a small footprint. When it gets wet and muddy, typically in the winter, that is when they would destroy a pasture. And we were getting frustrated with that. We didn't know what to do. Well, it so happened that I had gotten a book called Salad Bar Beef by Joel Salatin, and it was talking about raising grass-fed beef. And in that book, he talked about what he called his what was it, his hay shed or something like that. And the concept was, during the winter, when the soil temperatures are so cold that it will not assimilate the nutrients coming out of the cow, then he puts them into this hay shed, and he provides bedding, some sort of carbon material. And of course, they deposit their manure and urine there, and that carbon material will soak that up. And when it gets to where it needs more, he just adds more rather than scraping it out. And as long as you have your carbon and nitrogen ratio right, there's really no odor, okay? And rather than cleaning it out, you add to it. And so you start building this pack. So a lot of people refer to it as, I think it's deep mulch pack bedding or something like that. So we were intrigued by the idea, and we eventually tried it, built that, and it has been a game changer for us. So about mid-January, they go in there. We got a feed pad associated with that. There's a frost-free drinker on the feed pad. We put our mineral there, and then they get hay. And of course, we don't do any grain in our operation because we're selling grass-fed beef. And they're there for about 75 days. And then When the grass greens up in the spring, they come out, and then we clean out the barn, and you can see that big pile of stuff. That is the bedding from that. So back when we had 120,000 pounds of beef on the farm, and they all spent the winter in there, it got about 5 feet deep in the center. And with it being 5 foot deep, we were still able to drive the tractor up on there to feed hay. So there was a lot of material come out of there. So, you know, one of the advantages of rotational grazing is the distribution of the manure. So in one of those PowerPoints that we do, if you do continuous grazing, they say it takes like 28 years for every square yard to get a manure patty. But if you move your cows every 2 days, that changes down to it only takes 2 years to get manure on every patch or on every square yard. So you think about in a continuous grazing situation, your cows are going to congregate at the feed bunk, the hay ring, the shade, or the drinker. And that is where your nutrients are going to be. But when you're doing rotational grazing, then that changes. You're getting more even nutrient distribution across the field, and there's a debate about shade. Some people say you got to have it, others say you don't. I'm only in the very hottest summer months do I tend to even worry about that at all, but they seem to do okay even if they don't have it. But we're basically taking the decisions away from them, and we're kind of forcing them onto a smaller area, let them eat that, and get them onto the next place. So to facilitate all that, you got to have your infrastructure right. So water, fencing, things like that, and of course you got to have the skill set, and that will come in time. And like Joe Salton always said, you know, you just got to start doing it. You know, it's that first step you got to take. So you don't have to think you have to invest in a bunch of stuff to get started. Just one spool and away you go. You know, you cut a existing field in half and see what kind of results you get. By doing that, what you are actually doing, you're able to get a larger number of pounds onto those same acres. So it's essentially like getting free land, okay? But it's all done with your management. And a lot of people talk about how labor intensive it is. And you know, I won't lie, it can be. But once you get things figured out and once you learn, then you can shortcut it. And basically what I mean by that is, as we were learning, we set up perimeter fence, and then we were putting up temporary fencing like on a daily basis, a lot of it. And that was a job. Sometimes it was all three of us out there doing it. But if you can do that for a few years, 2 or 3 years, and see where those same places are that you always put that fence up, then what you need to be thinking about is putting a permanent fence there. And I'll be showing you here after a bit an example of some high tensile smooth wire fence that you can use in that manner. Now, I know of somebody else that had really good luck by just at the beginning of the year putting up a temporary fence and leaving it there the whole year. Then at the end of the year, he takes it down, and next year he moves it over a few feet, because sometimes if you have a permanent fence, that's when you start getting things like multiflora rose growing there. So you got maintenance issues. So some of that can be handled with spraying, it can be handled with weed eater, it can be handled with bush hog or lawnmower, things like that. And so everybody's going to be different. You're going to have different tools available to you and different goals, objectives, things like that. And as you guys are working with other people, I think you kind of need to know what the options are out there. You don't have to be experts, but kind of be aware of some of those things. And so my goal today is kind of make you aware of those things. And I'll say this right now, if you have questions from any of your customers that you might be dealing with and you don't have the answer, feel free to call me. I'll be happy to help you. And if your district is wishing to put on some sort of an event and need help, I'm happy to help with that as well, within reason, you know. So with that said, are there any questions thus far? Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about your watering systems when you're moving your cattle around?
Yes.
I imagine we'll see it when we go.
Yes, and that's kind of the big thing I want to cover today, and I got some examples of stuff here.
Okay.
So with the watering system, cows are herd animals. Now, I apologize. Today I'm talking about cows. I recognize sheep, goats, and all that. I just don't know much about them because I don't have them personally. But I hope when I retire to incorporate sheep into the herd. I have to believe that there's great benefit to that. One is they're a host. They actually are mutually beneficial to each other. Sheep are an end host to the parasites for cattle and vice versa. And so by having the two in the same field, you're actually helping with your parasite load. The other thing is Bob Hendershot always said that you could graze 2 sheep per every cow without competing for the same forage. Now you think about that. If I got 100 head of cattle out there, that means that I can have 200 sheep out there. If you have twins out of all those sheep, you know, all of a sudden you got, what, 400 sheep or 400 lambs? Now start doing the math on that. Lambs are selling pretty good. There is a tremendous opportunity to make additional money on the same acres. And when you have them together, they call it a flurd. And I'm not making that up. It's really called a flurd, a flock and a herd together. So there's a tremendous opportunity there. So I want you to kind of be aware of that so that you can be setting your fence up to accommodate that in the future. So my preference on fencing, for perimeter fencing, I like high tensile woven wire. Okay, because it takes care of everything. And I'll be showing that to you here in a little bit. Now, back to the drinkers. In order to really, truly accomplish good rotational grazing, the animals need to be able to get to water within 600 feet. If it's under 600 feet, they will come individually when they need a drink. If they have to go over that, they tend to come as a herd, okay? And your requirements for water then changes. You need to have the capacity to water the entire herd at the same time, okay? So try to have it 600 feet or less. And it might be something a little more than 600 feet. I've heard 600 to 800, but if you can try 600 feet, that's the ideal. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of the stats, if you guys have something different. So with that said, there's all sorts of types of drinkers. And you can see down here, that's a mere fount frost-free drinker. And we're going to go down and take a look at it. I'm going to show you the pros and cons of it. There's tire tanks. I got one of those to show you. Concrete tanks, I got one of those to show you. Then there's portable tanks like this one here. And this is one, I think it's a 70-gallon one. It's got a valve in the bottom. And I apologize for all the junk here, but this is the stuff we use. So one of the pros of this is you throw it on the golf cart. And by the way, this is our most valuable piece of equipment on the farm. We use it every day with the cattle. I like a golf cart because you can jump on it and off of it really quick and easy, because there's a lot of that. But this is just a Rubbermaid tank with, I think it's a Job valve in the bottom. And it's got, see the yellow ball, that's a float valve. So the trick to that is, one, it needs to be level. And two, it needs to be secured to something. So we typically put it up against the post and use a strap to secure it, because if the cattle drink it down low enough and they get fighting for water, they can knock it over and then it could run and exhaust your water supply. Now, if you're on county water, you're just going to have a large bill. Here's another thing to consider you could take one of those valves and put into a protein tub and set this inside a appropriate sized tire, and you could actually get enough scrap tires and put in every paddock, fill them with concrete, and they'll never move, and just move this and set it inside that, and then do, sorry, pipe. There's the cheapest form of valves is this one here. This is called a Plasson, P-L-A-S-S-O-N, I believe. Might be on here, yeah, P-L-A-S-S-O-N. So, when you're setting up your water system, you want to make sure you got enough capacity. On our farm, we did 1.5 inches across the farm, and then any small lines that come off of that directly to a drinker might be 3/4 inch. But you would have this below the surface of the ground, and there's the female end with the cap on to keep dirt out of it. There's the male end, and this is designed that when this goes in and it locks like that, then it automatically turns on. So you can have this on a short hose going to a protein tub, and just move the protein tub and that short hose and have lots of these out across the field below the surface of the ground so they don't freeze. And Brett, you looked at the price on these. What's
That combo,
$20 for this together? Okay, and these are all going to be rough estimates on prices. I do not have any of these on our farm. Okay, if I had things to do over again, I would be experimenting with these. The people that I know that have used these have given me good reports back. What we do have are some of these. Let me start with these right here. So these are brass fittings, I believe, and they're two different kinds, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but on the NRCS standards, they would have two of these valves, one to shut the water on and off, and one to release the valve, or release, yeah, to drain off the line. And this valve right here is about $70. Okay, so you're talking two of those, that's $140. Now, one way you can avoid two of those is this one right here. And this has a weep hole in it. Okay, so by doing this one valve, you can avoid putting in two. However, the price on it is $180. Okay, so they ain't cheap. Okay, and to turn those on and off, you have a wrench like that. So if you have a bunch of those, because of the cost of these, you'll probably have one wrench somewhere. And I can tell you that that wrench is always back at the barn when you need it. And so that's kind of frustrating for me. That weep hole is very similar to like this frost-free hydrant right here. Those are designed that when you turn that water off, it allows that water that's in that part above the ground to go through that weep hole below the surface of the ground so that it won't freeze. The only time those would freeze is if you have water up above that, like when it's on. So a cheaper version would be a PVC. And I believe this is about $8. I'm kind of partial to these myself. Now, the downside to this is they do tend to break easier. And that can be frustrating. And I'm going to show you where we have some of these. And we've got them all, other than those Plasson fittings. So the way you do this one is we have PVC pipes that have a notch in it that you can put down in the well and just do the quarter turn, and it's off. And by the way, for those of you not familiar, whenever you see your valve going across the pipe, that's off. And when it's in line, that's on, okay? Just for reference.
You have them everywhere, don't you?
Yes, so with the PVC ones, the tool to turn those on and off is cheap enough that we have them about everywhere. Matter of fact, if you look there at the curb in the driveway, you see that white upright? We have some valves on the other side of that fence, and that's one of those PVC tools that we made ourselves. And we've got 2 more that you're going to see today. So I tried to keep those right there close by and handy. Now, as far as the well that they go in, there's this version here, which if you're doing it in your yard, this is a nice version, decorative lid, and this would be flush with the ground. I will tell you that if you mow over it, I experienced this just the other day, it tends to suck this off the top and run through the mower. Okay, so there is a downside to it. So there's a couple of those missing. And it is important that you have those lids on there unless you're partial to cleaning dead animals out of those wells. I've had that happen a number of times. Pretty disgusting. A better way, like out in the field, and I'll show you some examples of it on our little walk today, is a PVC pipe that comes up out of the ground. You can put a PVC lid over the top. Those work very well, and it keeps the cattle out of them. With this one, if you had this out in the field, if a cow stepped on that, it could break it. Okay, so that's not real good in a cow pasture. You can't see it from here, but that depression in the ground, there's 2 of these for my house, and that's where I sucked one off and run through the mower the other day. Before we take our hike, why don't we talk a little bit about the fencing stuff, and we're kind of going to go back over this on our walk. So let's start with the temporary fencing. When we first started experimenting with rotational grazing, we had I guess a hard time accepting the fact that the poly wire fence is a psychological barrier. And because of that, we went and bought this rope. This is, it's got a metal strand through there, because we scoffed at the idea that something like this would ever turn a cow. We couldn't get our heads wrapped around that. We were still stuck in that mindset of it had to be a physical barrier. That stuff should be outlawed. That stuff's horrible. It never lasted well. It was a job to work with. It's horrible. I only keep that for this purpose right here, to say don't use that. So then the next thing we went to was this right here. And this is what's called an economy reel with poly tape. And most of the stuff that we have is Gallagher products. You know, there's a number of companies that have good quality stuff. I'm not necessarily partial to one over the other. It just happens that Gallagher is more readily available where we live. So the issue, and when we got this reel, we were in high cotton, because with that we made put a pipe through there and hooked it to a cordless drill, and boy, we were reeling that up, you know, sitting there holding that big thing. And when we got to this, we thought this is so much better. But for every crank, you get one turn on this, okay? And you will be cranking for some time. But we had 2 or 3 of these. You can buy these for, I don't know, 20, 30 bucks or something. We seldom use these. The only thing we really use these for is things that we're kind of putting up permanent, or at least seasonal. So then we went from that. I remember the first time I got one of these gear drills here, and at the time they were like 75 bucks. I think they're 100 bucks, maybe a little bit more now. So for every crank you do on this, it turns this 3 times. So it's a 3-to-1. And we bought one of these, and now I think today we have 11 of them. Okay, I cannot stress enough how important this is if you're getting serious about rotational grazing. And they are very durable. This one's probably 10, 12 years old or older. We have had some parts get damaged on some of them. Some of it you can replace, but they are extremely nice. On the end here, this is insulated, designed to be hooked to woven wire or even a hop fence. And then I can show you when we get out there how we connect them. So then going from that, we went to poly wire. Now, the advantage of poly wire over poly tape is that you can get twice the footage on the same spool. So I can get about 660 feet on that one. I can get twice that on this one, so over 1,300 feet. And the cattle respond to that. One of the things that I found really interesting, this was an experiment, we had sorghum sudan back here and it got to be about this high. And we were kind of late getting the cattle in there, but I ran poly wire through that between two of the rows. And of course you couldn't see it. And you know, some people think you got to mow down or bush hog down a path, but I just ran it through there. And of course there was vegetation up against it and everything. And I thought, they're contained in that field. Let's see what happens. They stopped right on it. Okay, they did not run through it. How? I can't tell you, but it works. Now, I will say one of the limiting factors of this stuff is that in the winter, during the snow, they don't seem to be able to see it, and they tend to go through it. I've had that happen a number of times, and so I have to remember if I have them out during the winter and we got a snow coming, I need to make sure I got poly tape. It works great through that. The downside is if you get ice, freezing ice on that, it'll sag down worse than this. So, you know, there's pros and cons to everything. So you just need to have several different tools in your tool belt. Now, from there, we're now transitioned to this stuff, turbo tape and turbo wire. And basically all that is it has more metal in there, so there's more conductivity in the poly wire or poly tape, so they get shocked better. And you know, the other part to this is you can't go and buy cattle at stockyards and turn them out in a paddock with this stuff and expect them to know what it is. You got to train your animals to it. And it is really better if you got brood cows that have been around for a while to teach the others. If you have to train some new ones, if you have a good physical fence, like woven wire, that you can put this inside of and let them come up, get shocked, learn what it's all about, then that works pretty good. We've bought some calves off of another farm, put them out with our existing ones, and they go right through it. And they'll go right through it without getting shocked before they even know they're into it. So, and same as with you, if you go out there and touch it, just because you touch it doesn't necessarily mean you get shocked. You got to kind of have to have a hold of it or be well grounded.
What kind of fencer do you have and how many volts are?
Well, I'm going to show you, and I can't begin to tell you how many volts or joules or any of that stuff, but what I will tell you is it works, and it's portable, and it's cheap. And we're going to see that when we go on our walk. And some people buy the big expensive ones, have them back at their home base, and there's actually ones that you can turn off out in the field. And you know, but you'll spend hundreds of dollars on those chargers. Ours, we just take to where the cows are and energize only where the cows are. And so we move it, and it's on a battery. We charge the batteries. The battery will last, you know, a week with them, and so we change it every few days or whatever, so it's good and hot. As far as stakes, step-in stakes, we started out with these TSC, and I don't mean to be dogging TSC. I buy a lot of things there, but basically any of these USA made step-in stakes like this. This is what they end up looking like. I bet you there's probably 100 of these buried out there where they break off there. They're, I don't know, $2-3 a piece. They're not worth it. I do have them in different places, like as fence stays, but they're pretty much worthless. And you see, like that one's broke there. These are actually some of the better ones, but those break off quick and easy. Now there are other brands, like I believe it's O'Brien, that's made in New Zealand, I believe, that you can take these and bend them, and they are high quality, but you're going to pay more for them. But these are an example of what you don't want. I haven't really used this one, but this is one that somebody gave me that looks to have its advantages. It seems to have held up well. And all these are still intact. I don't know how long they'll last. Don't know where it came from or how much it costs, but that is an option. But this is what we used. And I will tell you the main reason why we use this one is because through my brother's store, he was able to find a supplier where he can get them at cost, basically. These are called pigtails, and Gallagher makes a pigtail, and they're quite a bit more than what we paid for these. And these are pretty durable. The downside to these is they eventually crack up here, and then they'll start shorting out. If you reel this up fast and you have it in here, and it's like coming around the corner, it'll burn right through that. Okay, so you need to either reel it slow or take it out. These tend to get bent, and we have to bend those back. But we've had these probably, I'll say 8 years. They've held up pretty good. We've had to take some out and fix some. Now, these work good when you have just cattle because it's the right height. If you had sheep and goats, these probably would not work.
Sheep and goats, we graze goats. That's got a stake on it, like that.
So we do have some land that we graze on that we don't own that doesn't have perimeter fencing. Some of it is next to the county road. And back when we had calves, we would add this insulator here and run 2 strands, and that helped keep the calves in. I can tell you this is a pain in the butt to deal with, though. When you're holding these, that makes it tough to hold very many. So we always hated that. And of course, if you're doing 2 strands, then that's even tougher. And as far as how we would put this stuff out, I don't know if anybody else does this or not, but we would trip this and then hang this on our belt and hook it on one end, take the stakes in one hand and string it out. And as you go, just flip it in that pigtail. And then when you get to the other end, tighten it up, hang it on the fence, lock it in. And then I'll show you when we get out there how we make the connection. There's a few ways you can do that. Some people use alligator clips. We never did that. If we did that, we'd always have the alligator clips back at the barn. So another type of fencing is this timeless fence. Here's some examples of it. And I'll just put these out there for you guys to look at if you want. We do not have any of that on our farm. There is some places I wish we would have tried it. I've talked to some Amish that have used it, and they seem to be very happy with it. One of the advantages of this is, like with that high tensile smooth wire, you don't have to put any insulators on there. And that's kind of a weak point of the T-post, is you got to have those insulators on there. I generally keep a bag in the golf cart to replace the ones that are broken. So like when we go around and move cows, I try to keep an eye on that. But with this, if you run that smooth wire through there, you'll never have to worry about insulators again. I think it is kind of costly, but it's probably money well spent in the long term. Yeah, if anybody's interested in prices, we have a price sheet here. Oh, while we're here talking about this, a couple of things. I talked about securing. Oh, here's another stake I forgot. Here was one of our early fence stakes. This is a fiberglass one. You can see these little metal clips on here. What I don't like about this one, you can handle a lot of them in one hand, but they're hard to get in the ground. You kind of have to have some sort of a driver, and if you handle them with your bare hands, you get fiberglass in your hand. So these do not have a very long life in our farm, but I keep that for an example. So with it being fiberglass, it does not conduct, so you just get your electric into that little metal clip, and it's very adjustable. You know, I like that aspect of it, and it was pretty cheap. But the fiberglass in your hands and having to have a driver, I did not like. Back to the portable tub. If I'm not putting this up right at a fence where there's already a stake, sometimes I need to put in a T-post so you can drive that T-post right where you need it. And of course, you guys are, I'm sure, are all familiar with the T-post driver. And I'm not going to go through all the motions here. But you can also use this T-post driver to remove the stake. So if you have it in your cart, the way you do it is basically set it this way, push your T-post out like this to where it catches on that nipple, and then pull your stake back and it pulls it up. So you kind of have all the tools you need right there in your cart. When you get to fall or winter, you start feeding hay. We did what's called bale grazing, and basically we would set our hay bales out, and it might not show in that map because of the poor quality, but you could see in the aerial photos where we had those hay bales. And what we would do is set them up on end, take the wrap off. We'd leave the wrap on until we're ready to use them. But then once we're ready to use them, take the wrap off, roll a bale ring up to them, flip that over, and it was relatively easy. What we found is that when the cows came up and was hitting that, they would destroy the ground around it, and that was a good pathway for things like cocklebur and things like that to come back. So we got away from that and started rolling it out. There's all kinds of bale unrollers out there available. My brother, he invented this one that we basically can carry on the golf cart. We keep a strap on the front to drag the mineral feeder around, and with this, you just take it out. You have to set your bales out in advance, and you take this out there, and then you drive these stakes in the center, attach that strap, and that golf cart will roll the bale out. And it's pretty simple. And of course, what, $100 or so in materials there. And by rolling it out, a lot of people will look at that and say, you're wasting hay. Well, you're not. You're feeding the soil. The cows will eat what they want. And yes, there will be hay left there. It might end up being bedding, but ultimately it's going back to your soil. The spring I want developed, and you really need to kind of think that through. Like, how many head are you going to be providing for? Because it's not cheap to develop a spring. So sometimes the most cost-effective way is county water. County water is, generally the most reliable way as well. I was very fortunate on this farm. There was already a well-developed spring here. And so if you look up there where that blue tarp is, that is the spring. And basically what happens there is there's a crack in the rock, and they put a corrugated pipe in there and backfilled with gravel, and then capped it with concrete. And then eventually it started leaking, and we repaired it a couple years ago. That's why the tarp's up there when we poured the concrete. But anyhow, that's where the water is captured. From there, it's piped down here in a PVC pipe to this what do you call it, sediment basin. So here's the water coming in. You can see the amount of flow. Okay, and this pipe here is going down there to a cistern, and then once it fills up and more water comes into this, it'll eventually overflow into this reservoir here. Does that make sense? Okay. So a year or two ago, we cleaned the sediment out of the bottom of this, but when I first lived here for the first 15 years, I drank the water that came out of this. This went to the house, it went all over. So the excess goes to the reservoir. The reservoir is gravity feeding a tank at the bottom of the hill that we're going to see here in a minute. But what goes down that pipe, that cistern, is what feeds the rest of the farm. Okay?
What's the pot?
We used that to dip out the sediment, I think is what that was for. Okay?
Some nice crawdads in there.
You want them?
No, you can have them.
There's been times I've opened this up and there's salamanders in here. Of course, they can get in and out here.
That's awesome.
So the guy that developed this was Jim Ruslow. He did it back in the 70s, and he was kind of the guru when it came to water infrastructure. He's now deceased, but no dead bodies in here. So I believe this is a 1,500-gallon tank, concrete tank, and it has a submersible pump in there. So there's electric that's run down here, and the only time we've ever had problems with running out of water is when we've had an issue with the tank leaking or something of that nature. Or there was a time or two that we filled up swimming pools in August. That didn't work out well. But that spring has kept up with 120,000 pounds of cattle during the hot, dry part of the summer. So it's a good spring. That's kind of a rarity. So from here, it's pumped up to the red barn, and there's what's called a bladder tank in the red barn that provides the pressure. So all the drinkers that we have on the farm are either on county water or this pressurized spring system, or they're separate and they're gravity fed. I'll show you gravity fed here in just a second. Here is our livestock crossing. So we got a pasture over there, pasture over here, but to get the cows from there to here, we put up a temporary fence like you see here. This is just the gap that closes this off. But this was actually done through NRCS, and that's armored underneath the surface there, and it is rock solid. It used to be a mudslide. The cows made it a mess, and it's solid rock down at the bottom. The plan called for a keyway in the bottom there, and then stone up from there, and it has been absolutely wonderful. So here's how we move the cows in. Here we have a concrete tank, relatively clean. We cleaned it the other day. The valve was broke on this, so we had a problem. Now, this is one that's gravity fed, and like where the valve is off on it now, we got to get that fixed. We just turned the volume down to where it was just staying ahead of the cows, and then of course the overflow goes out here and daylights out to the creek. But when I opened it all the way up, it was 12 feet in the air. It was like a geyser. Okay, so the valves to control this are in these pipes right down here, and here is the key that I was talking about. And it's real easy to keep that on the fence. You can just put that on the valve and twist it. Got one on each end. Okay, and store it, you just put it in your woven wire fence, just like that. You got it right where it's needed. So there's actually 3 valves down there that are taking care of this right here. Any questions on any of this?
So you normally have a float valve on this for the water?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. It's actually in the back of the golf cart. So what happened is last winter we had ice form on this, and then it broke that off because it got frozen in there. So we have to fix it. and that goes to my brother Mark. He's the infrastructure guy.
Got it.
Okay, so he's got the plumbing store. He knows all the parts and all that.
So you'll utilize this water in the winter too, then?
Yes, up until they go in the hoop barn.
Yeah.
Just when they come through this. So they drink off of this when they're in this field, and the end of that next field, we leave that gate open for them to have access back down here, and then they go up to the tire tank that we're going to next. Okay, it's always nice to have a lot of options. So like with this being gravity fed, you know, we got county water, we got the spring water, we got gravity fed. We also have a tender where we can haul water if we can get to it somewhere, you know, that holds 800 gallons. We got 300 gallon portable tanks. We got 100 gallon, we got 70 gallon, we got protein tubs. I mean, somehow, some way, we will get water to them if there's water to be had.
What's the water over here on this side?
That's all pressurized off the spring.
Okay.
So that spring feeds absolutely everything on this side of Poplar Ridge Road. It does not feed anything over at my brother Mark's on the other side of Poplar Ridge. All that's county water.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Let's head back up the hill. Somebody had it in their front yard, and over the time I've watched it go from there right down the fence rows from there, and now here it is 25 years later. It's all over my farm, and I ain't happy about it.
What are some of your management practices for that? Take it down when you can? Or?
Yeah, when I find time, but I never find enough time to do what I need to be doing. So as far as the herd here, this is this year's meat herd and next year's. So I've already bought the stockers for next year. So there's 69 of them out there, I believe. So roughly half of them will go to market this fall, and then the other half, you want to step on in, I'll close the gate. The other half will go next fall or next year sometime. So after this year's herd is all harvested, I'm hoping that that we transition into the next one without a break. Put it in the center of the field with the access road to it, and with the idea that from here we can service the entire field, give them a different section each time. And of course we put our water out here. So that's a tire tank that we made ourselves, and my brother Dan come up with that design on top to keep it from caving in. One thing bad about, come on over here and look at this. One thing bad about tire tanks is if you don't put something over them like this, cows will want to get in them. And if they get in them, they tear up the valve. So this is the best float valve, and they are good. They're expensive. I don't remember what they are, but I think they're a couple $100. But this was designed, this part right here was designed specifically for this tire so that it would not collapse. To drain this, you unscrew this, and it's piped to that right there. And then here's the valve. So you can turn it off right there. If anybody wants to see one, you're welcome to see that. But we try to put these in the fence line where they don't get hit with equipment or cows don't get on them. If you'll notice, that valve is not all the way open and it's not all the way closed. There's a reason for that. If we open that valve all the way open, the pump can't keep up with it, and then it loses its prime. So we have learned, and that's the only one on the farm that's that way, but we have learned that you can't open this all the way. Learned it the hard way. And once again, you need some kind of cover over that so animals don't get in it. And here's our key for the valve. Our mineral feeder there. Cows were on this side for 3 days. We sectioned it off. They had a third of that each day. And at that time, this poly tape was on this side of the feed pad. And now that we took them over there, we flip it over to this side. Okay, so what's left is that corner over there, and we're going to move them here real quick. If I could have a volunteer to go to the other end of that wire and they can reel it up. It's hanging on the other end. Would anybody like to do that? Okay, I have to move them. I would have normally gone ahead and given them this section, but knowing that you guys were going to be here today, middle of the day, I figure I can get a day and a half out of this, so I'm going to let them have this, and tomorrow night they're going to get moved out of here. Okay? So,
are you bush hogging this or anything, or just letting it?
I probably will, yeah. If I can get time. If not, if it gets too far ahead of me, I'll let it go and hit it next time. Okay, so if you guys look at how I have this connected here, and by the way, this is a third type of poly wire. This is poly braid, they call it. Okay, so now he's taking it off the other end, but I just wrapped it around there a few times, and away it goes. Now, one of the things that will sometimes happen as he reels it up is it'll get caught up in this. See? If you jerk on it a few times, it'll work itself out like that. When he gets down here with that, I'll show you how we connect it. So you see how I connect the tail end, just wrap it around and then connect it down here. Sometimes you have the other end up here, and what I would do in that case is just lay it across there. I call it cow therapy.
They know the drill.
Yep, they do. Now, one of the things that's interesting is like if you have a big field and you're moving them across the field and there's like a week in there, when you get to the other end and they know they're going to go through that next gate and you've changed the plans and you want to go back out the other end, you have to make them go. I mean, they are standing at that gate looking back at you like, come on, get the gate open. You know, you got to physically get the wire out and push them back to the other end.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
When I came to the grazing school here, they talked a lot about the grazer's eye.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
What is it that you're looking at out here that justifies the move and so on and so forth?
Okay. So when you first go through the grazing school, they teach you to take half, leave half. Okay. As you get better with it, they teach you take a third, leave 2/3. And I want you to think about whatever you leave out there, that is your solar panel. So the more leaf matter you have out there, the more photosynthesis is going to occur. And the energy is in the tips of the plant. So if you can just graze the tips and get out and move on, that's ideal. The grazer's eye, if you graze a paddock and you come in and see that it all looks like this right here, you've overgrazed it. Okay? But you can see that there's a lot of stuff that's still up. And right over there, that's overgrazed. But you go out to the other end of that and it's not. Okay? So you kind of have to look at the whole picture. Okay, and the reason why this is overgrazed here is because of the species that's here. Okay, that species is different than that. That's fescue out there. There's a lot of Johnson grass right here that was very palatable for them. So it becomes a thing where through experience, you look at the field and say, based on what I got yesterday's results, they need more or less, and you adjust accordingly. Okay? There are some people that move their cattle 6 times a day. I'm not here to do that. And there's mechanical ways you can do that. I'm not that good at it, and nor will I ever be, I suspect. But that's the grazer's eye. You learn from experience. Can I borrow that a second? Okay. Actually, I'm going to have you hold that. Okay, so imagine that we had that hooked on the other end, and I'm going to cross it right here, hang it on there. Okay. The way that I would connect that is I would put this right in here, and then I would take this and just wrap it around like this and put it over that and let it go. Now you got it connected. When you're all done and need to take it down, it's that simple. When we first started, we were tying knots. All three of us are Eagle Scouts. We were tying all kinds of knots. Knots are hard to untie, you know, and we figured that out. All you have to do is just wrap it around, hook it on there, and let her go. So, any questions?
Got this fresh grass here, but they still have access to this water and
Correct.
Residuals over here.
Yep.
What's your management plan after they're out of here?
I'll show you. We're going. One of the things with having them the cows trained to that poly wire, is being able to move them. I can make an alley with that poly wire, or poly tape, or poly braid with no electric on it, and make those cows go about anywhere. Sometimes they'll jump out of it, but they want to travel as a herd. So even if one jumps out, he'll want to jump back in. Okay, so where they are, that's the farthest end of our farm that way. That's a half a mile out to Poplar Ridge, and we go almost another half a mile back east to Thosman. So from one end of the farm to the other, it's about a mile, close to a mile. And by making alleyways, using existing fence on one side, putting up a temporary fence on the other side, we have a travel corridor using driveways and township roads to get clear to the other end. Now, it's a job, don't get me wrong, but a lot of that infrastructure is already in place. So let's move down to this drain. Temporary fence right in that same spot, time after time after time after time. Once we did that for so long, we then determined that's where that needs to be. We set our drinker in that line, so it's just like this one, so that fence comes right over this center part. Okay, so it's feeding both sides. Our intent is to do the same thing with this and actually put a fence to the barn there. So I love these things, but they are rather expensive. Sometimes they are a bit to work on. They get ants in them, but it basically works like your toilet. And right now I have it turned off, but remember the valves I was showing you there a little bit ago? We got one of those $180 valves below here, and it's attached to this. And so you can turn it on that easy. You don't have to have that PVC pipe. And then, of course, the way you fill this side is punch that out. You really want to get it all cleaned up and everything. And then simply take that and put on this side. And it'll fill that side up. Does that make sense? The disadvantage of having this way is if that valve goes bad, you got to take the whole thing up to get to it. But there are definite advantages to it. Any questions?
This is a 12 string.
So we have electric down here that goes to that breaker box up there. And so there's a unit that you drop in here, run the wire down there, access the panel down there, plug it in, turn the breaker on and off as you need it. And it is very nice having that during the winter. So like the one that's on the feed pad by the hoop barn, we keep it on all winter. These will just be on as we're doing our rotation.
What's the maximum amount of cows? Because there's obviously a lot less water right here than there is in the
right, and that's where it comes back to being within 600 feet. They need to be able to come back individually because this does not have the capacity. This may run the whole time so they can individually come, but like that one that we looked at, the tire tank and the concrete tank, it has the capacity that they can all come and drink at once. That make sense?
Yeah. And then is this one well water also, or is this
spring water? Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, spring water.
And it's a pressurized system. So, and it goes clear across the farm, clear to Poplar Ridge.
Yeah, I see one over there.
Yep.
How many of these do you have altogether?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10.
So when you're talking with producers about putting these in, are these what you recommend?
Before I did this again, I think I'd try this class on fittings.
Okay.
And if I had good success with that, I might not ever have one of these. The disadvantage to the I think I'd still have one of these at the hoop barn for the true winter,
Yeah.
you know, but the disadvantage to the Plason is when you're plugged into that, that line could freeze overnight, you know, November, December, January before they get into the hoop barn. So that could be a problem.